¿Qué tal, Paco? Manda, ¿cómo está? Ándale, ¿cómo le fue? Les ha, les ha estado lloviendo, ¿verdad? Lo que veo. Pues qué bueno, qué bueno. Qué bueno, qué bueno, como siempre se ha dicho por ahí, queda más del agua que de la sequía. Así es. Exactamente. Nada, para nada. Qué bueno, qué bueno. Qué bueno, papás, que estén bien. Pues está bien, descanse. Yo nomás quería ver cómo andaban. Échenle ganas. A mí me saluda mi mamá, ha de andar con mi María, ¿verdad? ¿A qué, o es la semana que le toca a mi mamá estar ahí con mi María? Ey. Oh, sí, algo me dijo mi mamá que porque estaba el superintendente y se iban a la reunión, algo así. Ajá. No está bueno. Como quiera que sea, lo bueno que anda en el movimiento la gente. Ujú, ujú. Ah, que pues qué bueno que la cosa está suave. Ajá. Ujú. Eso. No, pues una movida. Bueno. Ajá. Pues bueno, ándale pues, pues échale ganas y estamos en contacto. Ahí no vas a ver para saludarlo. Si ahí le dice a mi mamá que hay. En la mañana se me hace complicado hablarle porque me voy temprano. Salgo más temprano de lo normal ahorita. Estos días he estado saliendo. Y si le hablo temprano, pues va a estar descansando todavía. ¿Mande? Que no le he marcado en la mañana porque es muy temprano cuando me voy a trabajar y mi mamá ha de estar descansando. Por eso no marco. las 5. Ajá. 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 Bueno, pues bueno, échale infundia, que tengan una excelente tarde. Estamos en contacto. Claro que sí, igualmente. Muy buenas tardes. Hasta luego. Bye bye.
That's one of the reasons we remember him so fondly. So, I do think it sets up a contrast with Trump, because what he's saying is, you know what, I'm not the only one who can do this. And I never put the country, I never thought I was more important than the country.
Yeah.
That is a good message moving forward.
Probably a lot of those people, 500 of them going in. How does it feel to you to look at that moment?
I think it's bittersweet for them, right? They have spent 3.5 years working on these important initiatives to move our country forward. And, there's 6 more months where they're going to continue to do that. But I think it's somewhat bittersweet for them because, it is somewhat of the symbol of that, Kamala's going to take the reins and sort of move things forward. And it's got to be a little bit difficult, while at the same time knowing they still have a lot of work to do for the country.
I mean, that image is the exact reason why, one of the main reasons why I think this is so hard for any politician
politician to decide to not run again, because you have a whole infrastructure of thousands of people who work for you on the premise that you're going to run again, that you're going to continue to do it, that they're going to continue to have jobs after this is all over. And so to say to them, I'm taking myself out of it, is a hard decision to make. But what's happened in the Democratic Party since then has been, I think, beyond what most Democrats that I've talked to expected. I don't know that anybody really expected the party to feel as energized as it does, to feel as excited as it does. That is very real. And in a way, I think that helps Joe Biden tonight as he gives this address. If he had left this party in a fractured state, which when I talked to people close to him was a big concern of his, he, I think, would be coming into the speech in a completely different mood. But that is not where the Democrats are right now.
David Fromm?
I get all the interior reasons why, at a moment like this, the president and the people around him are thinking about themselves and what they've lost and what they're giving up. But as I said in the first segment, this is not the last speech of the Joe Biden presidency. That comes in January 2025. This is the first important endorsement of the Vice President Harris for president campaign, and he needs to make it not about himself and how he feels, but about why the country should give his running mate, his vice president, his administration a second term. And if he won't sell that, no one will.
I guess I kind of see it differently. I don't really see this as the beginning of Vice President Harris's campaign. I think that's going to come at the DNC. I imagine Joe Biden will make a more specific pitch for her there. I think this is the beginning of the end of Joe Biden's term in public life. And he is going to try to frame his legacy around that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think for Democrats, there was a sense of malaise around this election for the last year and a half, under the belief that the country are kind of checked out because checked out of this election. We are now seeing, because of the energy that's been driven over the last 4 or 5 days, part of the reason folks were checked out was because of the options that they had. So I think to Abby's point, the best gift that Joe Biden has given the staff, the campaign, is this decision right now. It has breathed new life into the Democratic Party and given them a new opportunity in November.
You know, in 1968, Lyndon Johnson couldn't even attend the convention. He was a pariah at his own convention. His vice president was burdened with him. Sadly, because he had an extraordinary domestic record, but the Vietnam War had so sullied it that he was the object of scorn. Joe Biden will go to Chicago and he will be celebrated.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, David, quickly.
At the Republican convention, the past living Republican two-term president wasn't invited. The last Republican nominee wasn't invited. The speaker of the leader of the Republicans in the Senate wasn't invited.
Yeah, and here we are. And this obviously will be very different. Well, as we await President Biden's address to the nation, thanks so much to all of you and to all of you for joining us. Special coverage of President Biden's address to the nation begins now.
Away from hearing words that have not been spoken by a sitting president since March of 1968. That is when then President Lyndon Johnson, nearly 40 minutes into a speech on the Vietnam War, suddenly pivoted and shocked the nation by saying, quote, "I shall not seek and will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president," unquote. Tonight from the Oval Office, history will not repeat itself. It won't come as a surprise, but it certainly will rhyme, and strangely so. Just as in 1968, a sitting vice president will ultimately likely become the party's nominee and will accept the nomination at a Democratic convention in Chicago, same as then, after an outbreak of political violence, in this case, the attempt on Donald Trump's life. Back then, the murders of Senator Robert F. Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Well, thankfully, the country tonight is neither in mourning nor bogged down in a bitterly divisive war. It is, however, in the middle of the kind of political and generational transition which most Americans have never seen before. And the next step is just minutes away. We have already gotten some excerpts of what President Biden will say tonight. CNN's MJ Lee joins us now from the White House with that. So what do we expect to hear?
Well, Anderson, President Biden is about to deliver what has to have been one of the most challenging speeches he has ever had to write, coming after a period of a really wrenching decision for the president. Speaking from the Oval Office, he is going to address the American people first time about that stunning decision to drop out of the 2024 race and lay out his vision for the the coming months that are left of his first term in the White House, he is going to make clear that that decision came from the belief that he believes that it was best for the country for him to drop out. He will say the defense of democracy is more important than any title, clearly a reference to his own title. And while all of this comes after a really remarkable sequence of political events, one name that we do not expect the president to mention tonight is that of Donald Trump's. I've spoken to a senior official who saw a draft of the president's remarks, and they say that they should expect the contents of the speech to be really high level. In other words, to really meet the moment that the president is in and that the country is in right now. But however, a different person whose name we do expect the president to talk about is, of course, Kamala Harris, his vice president. He will say the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. And of course, Anderson, Vice President Kamala Harris is the person that he is hoping to successfully pass the presidential torch to now.
And what is the mood among White House staff tonight?
Yeah, you know, this has been an incredibly emotional time for a lot of folks here at the White House, and certainly the Biden campaign as well. The news from the president over the weekend that he was dropping out of the race really came as a big shock to so many folks. We know that it was a very closely held decision, so a lot of people just certainly were not expecting that decision. But just putting the politics aside too, for a lot of these people, they feel like they have sacrificed a lot to work in this administration or for the campaign. And you do just sort of get the sense, talking to folks behind the scenes, that tonight's speech from the president could end up having a bit of a cathartic influence. Now, standing here at the South Lawn, just moments ago, we did see a big procession of folks that work at the EEOB walking towards the White House, where we are expecting that there's going to be a watch party of sorts. They're going to have pizza and beer and wine and watch the president deliver these important remarks together. But of course, a celebratory event is usually what a watch party is, but I think that certainly doesn't capture the mood for so many people that are watching this speech tonight. Anderson?
Historic night. I'm Jay Lee. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Anderson. With me here in studio, CNN's John King, Casey Hunt, Dana Bash, Nia Malika Henderson, and Biden biographer and New Yorker writer Evan Osnos. Dana, you just heard those excerpts from MJ. What do you make of the tone that President Biden, we're told, is trying to set?
He knows how important this speech is, and it's the most important speech he never wanted to give, but he's going to give it. And so that's why I'm told by a senior administration official that since he made the decision and wrote that initial letter that surprised everybody that he put out on social media, he's been working on this speech. We don't expect it to be very long, but we expect it, if he has the kind of effect that he wants it to have, to pack a big punch with the message that he's giving. Again, not so much about himself, although part of it will be about that, but about what he sees as the stakes for the country.
And Casey, what more are you expecting to hear from the president tonight?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that sticks out to me and what we've learned so far, and as I've talked to sources on the Hill and elsewhere today, is that this idea that he is messaging exactly what he was trying to push against Donald Trump. A lot of people were not hearing a lot of what he had to say because of the challenges he was facing. But this idea that it's about the country and not about you. They have been trying to argue that Donald Trump is obsessed with himself. He is out for himself. That is a campaign message that they were trying to push. And you saw it, for example, in the letter that Jamie Raskin wrote, urging the president to step down, that you actually should live this idea that it's not about you. And I think that when we hear that from the president, it does actually play directly into the campaign that's going to continue to unfold.
And John, the president is expected to say, quote, the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation, evoking John F. Kennedy. How do you think that's going to be received?
I can tell you from a couple of days I just spent in your home state, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I think it's going to be received very well. Your eyes don't lie. Even people who love Joe Biden have watched the deterioration over the last few months, watched the debate, and were horrified. I got a sense of gratitude from voters. And there's this an interesting dynamic. His approval rating was a drain on him, made him simply non-competitive in this race after the debate. It just did. Now, as he's free to be a candidate, he gets to be president again. Oddly, if the American people start to view him more favorably, Kamala Harris will benefit from that. And so he has a chance now to be president. Of course, he'll be involved in the campaign. But if he ticks up a little bit, every little bit he ticks up will help her.
And Nia Malika, how much should he focus on his vice president tonight, the one to whom he is passing the torch?
Yeah, that's right. Listen, he's obviously going to talk about his
accomplishments and cast her as a partner in those accomplishments. If you think back to when he called in, when she went to the Delaware headquarters, it was a very warm exchange, right? He said, love you. He called her kid endearingly several times. There is some worry among some Democrats that this narrative that is out there, that Kamala Harris sort of pushed him over. You hear Donald Trump kind of talking about, there's some worry that maybe some Democrats think that, right? So I think his presence tonight, saying that this is his decision, saying that he thinks it's in the best interest of the country to pass the torch, I think that's going to go a long way in allaying some of those fears that there's this idea out there that Kamala sort of pushed him to the side.
Evan, he is an emotional guy, an emotional old school Paul, right? His eyes glazed with tears. We've all seen it. This is probably going to be really tough for him.
I mean, this is incredibly difficult. You have to think about this is a position he has pursued since he was in college. I mean, he's thought of himself as a potential president even all the way back in high school when John F. Kennedy became the first Irish Catholic president. And here he is making the exceedingly rare decision in American politics at, let's face it, a fairly narcissistic time in politics where you see people, elected officials who put themselves ahead of the country making this rare choice. I think this is a chance also, for the reasons John said, is now the issue of age is off the table. There is a moment of relief. He can go back full circle to the issues that got him into this race, which was about standing up to authoritarianism at home and abroad. So in a way, I think you're starting to hear him say the things he was saying in the inauguration, which is about we are at a country in a winter of peril, in a sense. We are at a moment when it is up to us to defend our democracy. And the goal will be if he can make it less about him and make it about us.
Do you think, Evan, that history will remember the speech tonight and not the 3.5 weeks preceding it that were so chaotic, and not however months were going on where he was deteriorating? Do you think that ultimately that will be erased because of this act?
The short answer is that this speech is historic in and of itself. Simply the fact that it is happening for the first time in more than half a century is the end of that fact. However, the final verdict on what Joe Biden has done in this brutal question of age will be decided in November. Mm-hmm. Whether or not he has, in fact, been the bridge to the new generation. And we won't know that. And that tonight is about him calling voters together, reminding them that is what is at stake.
But then, as you know, I mean, Republicans are not going to let it die there. We're already told that the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Jamie Comer, is going to hold hearings. How long has this been going on? Republicans, the Trump campaign is out there saying that Kamala Harris was part of the quote-unquote cover-up.
Which is why in CNN's new polling today, it showed, it really was interesting to me, maybe a little bit surprising given that talking point that is out there, that now that the president has made his decision, most people say he's okay to serve the rest of his term.
Like 70% of the
I mean, it's really something. So they're going to play their games, and they're going to do what they can because they have the power of the gavel, and that's what they do. But it doesn't seem as though that dog is going to hide.
I will say that I have talked to some Democrats who run House and Senate races who actually are a little bit worried about the cover-up charge. I think that less so the question of whether President Biden should continue to serve, but more so the idea that this was kept from voters, right? Like they're two separate things, and people really react to the idea that this was covered up, that they were lied to about what was going on. That is a real vulnerability, and I've had some members of Congress, Congresswoman Annie Kuster from New Hampshire, admitted it to me on the record.
Yeah, and those are questions for another moment, but right now we are about to go to the Oval Office and hear this historic address from President Joseph Robinette Biden.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. In this sacred space, I'm surrounded by portraits of extraordinary American presidents. Thomas Jefferson wrote the immortal words that guide this nation. George Washington, who showed us presidents are not kings. Abraham Lincoln, who implored us to reject malice. Franklin Roosevelt, who inspired us to reject fear. I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think is more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. We can never forget that. And I never have. I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine our fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America's going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division. We have to decide, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect, freedom, justice, and democracy? In this moment, we can see those we disagree with not as enemies, but as fellow Americans. Can we do that? Does character and public life still matter? I believe you know the answer to these questions, because I know you, the American people, and I know this. We are a great nation because we are good people. When you elect me to this office, I promise to always level with you, to tell you the truth. And the truth, the sacred cause of this country is larger than any one of us. And those of us who cherish that cause, cherish it so much. The cause of American democracy itself must unite to protect it. You know, in recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. It's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. There's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now. Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I'll keep defending our personal freedoms and our civil rights, from the right to vote to the right to choose. I'll keep calling out hate and extremism, make it clear there is no place in America for political violence, or any violence ever, period. I'm going to keep speaking out to protect our kids from gun violence, our planet from climate crisis that is the existential threat. And I will keep fighting for my cancer moonshot so we can end cancer as we know it, because we can do it. And I'm going to call for Supreme Court reform because this is critical to our democracy, Supreme Court reform. You know, I will keep working to ensure America remains strong, secure, and the leader of the free world. I'm the first president of this century to report to the American people that the United States is not at war anywhere in the world. We'll keep rallying a coalition of proud nations to stop Putin from taking over Ukraine and doing more damage. We'll keep NATO stronger, and I'll make it more powerful and more united than any time in all of our history. I'll keep doing the same for our allies in the Pacific. You know, when I came to office, the conventional wisdom was that China would inevitably surpass the United States. That's not the case anymore. And I'm going to keep working to end the war in Gaza, bring home all the hostages, and bring peace and security to the Middle East and end this war. We're also working around the clock to bring home Americans being unjustly detained all around the world. You know, we've come so far since my inauguration. And that day I told you, as I stood in that winter, we stood in a winter of peril and winter of possibilities, parallel possibilities. We were in the grip of the worst pandemic in the century, the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. We came together as Americans, and we got through it. We emerged stronger, more prosperous, and more secure. Today we have the strongest economy in the world, creating nearly 16 million new jobs, a record. Wages are up. Inflation continues to come down. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years. We're literally rebuilding our entire nation, urban, suburban, rural, and tribal communities. Manufacturing has come back to America. We're leading the world again in chips and science and innovation. We finally beat Big Pharma after all these years to lower the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. And I'm going to keep fighting to make sure we lower the cost for everyone, not just seniors. More people have health care today in America than ever before. And I signed one of the most significant laws helping millions of veterans and their families who are exposed to toxic materials. You know, the most significant climate law ever in the history of the world. The first major gun safety law in 30 years. Today, the violent crime rate is at a 50-year low. We're also securing our border. Border crossings are lower today than when the previous administration left office. I've kept my commitment to appoint the first black woman to the Supreme Court of the United States of America. I also kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and be a president for all Americans. That's what I've done. I ran for president 4 years ago because I believed and still do that the soul of America was at stake. The very nature of who we are was at stake. And that's still the case. America's an idea. An idea stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It's the most powerful idea in the history of the world. That idea is that we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're all created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We've never fully lived up to it, to this sacred idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I do not believe the American people will walk away from it now. In just a few months, the American people will choose the course of America's future. I made my choice. I've made my views known. I would like to thank our great Vice President Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country. Now the choice is up to you, the American people. When you make that choice, remember the words of Benjamin Franklin hanging on my wall here in the Oval Office, alongside the busts of Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Cesar Chavez. When Ben Franklin was asked, as he emerged from the convention going on, whether the founders have given America a monarchy or republic, Franklin's response was, a republic, if you can keep it. A republic, if you can keep it. Whether we keep our republic is now in your hands. My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. Nowhere else on earth could a kid with a stutter, from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claremont, Delaware, one day sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. But here I am. That's what's so special about America. We're a nation of promise and possibilities, of dreamers and doers, of ordinary Americans doing extraordinary things. I've given my heart and my soul to our nation, like so many others. I've been blessed a million times in return with the love and support of the American people. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands. The idea of America lies in your hands. You just have to keep faith. Keep the faith. And remember who we are. We're the United States of America. And there's simply nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's act together. Preserve our democracy. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you.
President Biden saying the idea of America lies in your hands in a speech tonight from the Oval Office, pledging to finish out his term in office, but passing the political torch to Vice President Harris, saying, I revere this office, but I love my country more. I want to get a quick first take from three people who've worked with President Biden: David Axelrod, Kate Bedingfield, Van Jones. David,
I think it was about as good a speech as he could have made. I think it was powerful and poignant, and it had a principle behind it. And you just read it. The idea that the country is more important than any one individual, and that he thought he could best serve his country by stepping aside now. And he said, I've made my choice, now the choice is yours. I thought the end of that speech was so moving. The fact that, he is, in fact, a reflection of the greatness of America, that this kid from Scranton and Claymont.
a kid with a stutter. That's
Yes,
what started.
yes.
Which is so interesting to me that he's President of the United States, and that is the first way he describes himself, a kid with a stutter.
Yes. And of course, that's the thing, the quality of Joe Biden that has allowed him to persist all these years against all these odds. But he's leaving, forget the 3.5 weeks. He's done an unnatural thing, very rare in the annals of history. He stepped away from power, and he did it in the interest of the country.
In spite of, as he said, personal ambition.
I think history will look kindly on Joe Biden, and I think people will look differently on him tomorrow than they did a week ago, and they will maybe see his achievements and his commitment to this country more clearly.
Okay.
I think one of the things that was so compelling about this is it had the emotional heft of a concession speech, but he was laying out a path forward, not just for the next 6 months of his presidency, but also kind of laying down a challenge to the country. Who do we want to be? And where do we want to go? And the other thing that struck me while I was listening to it, as somebody who's worked for him for a long time, worked with him in 2019, 2020, how much of the thematic was the same as I heard from him in 2019 when he was running for president, when he wanted to take on Donald Trump because he believed Trump posed a threat to democracy and that Trump was tearing us apart as a country in a fundamental way and was a threat to unity. And so in this moment that, by all measure is historic and I think will be remembered for a very long time, so much of what he was saying was so true to why he got into this race in the first place. And that, showed me that even as I know this was incredibly hard for him to do, this would be hard for anyone to do. It feels almost unnatural for someone to have achieved, the thing that they have been working toward their entire life and then say, the best thing is for me to step aside. Even knowing how hard that was for him, I think hearing those important themes come through, I think he was shining a light for the country moving forward over the next 3.5 months through a really perilous election.
He said America's at an inflection point. He asked the questions, do we still believe in honesty, decency, respect? Does character in public life still matter? And he said, I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. He asked the question, does character still matter? Well, it does tonight. It does tonight. The kid with the stutter did good. He did good. That's a good man. He fell on the sword. He fell on the sword. Most heroes, they fight to the bitter end. He fell on this sword. But the heart's still there. The words aren't as clear.
Technologies. Today, I'm proud to announce the first ever nationwide employer healthcare plan that gives you access to the best doctors, hospitals, and first ever integrative medicine, all while reducing your costs. Finally break free from the constraints. The Lord gives him the strength to do that.
Dana, he said, that a kid with a stutter can make it all the way to the Resolute desk at the White House. He also sort of fixed a couple of things that had maybe not been said the way he wanted to in prior things. He said, we finally beat Big Pharma, which I think was what he meant to say when he said we beat Medicare. And he talked about the first black woman on the Supreme Court, also something that he mentioned in an interview the other day that got a little bit garbled. So kind of a redo here in some ways, and perhaps this is the speech he would have given.
I really wanted to love this speech. I wanted to be happy for him. I wanted to say, good for you, sir, and I wanted to feel reassured that he has got what it takes to get us through the next 6 months. People really wanted to know what just happened in the last 3 weeks. But this speech was like a mini State of the Union. It was like something he could have given in January of 2025. It rang hollow for me. It did not answer any of those questions, and I do not think that it helps Kamala Harris as she tries to make some sort of a break with him, as she tries to get this nomination and try to beat Donald Trump. It's going to be very difficult for her to do so. He's got 6 months left, and there's a lot of problems in this country. He said he's going to fix all of them, so we'll see how that goes.
Britt, tomorrow marks 4 weeks since that debate, the CNN debate, where the president walked out there, said the first few words, mangled some of his sentences, and caught everybody by surprise as far as that moment. His party then jumped, and everything transpired after that. It marks 2 weeks almost to the assassination attempt of the former president. Think of all that has transpired in this 4 weeks of history, real time. It's almost hard to digest.
It's as an extraordinary period of news as I can remember. I've been doing this for well more than half a century. In terms of news, this is the most tumultuous period I could think of. And, you know, I think when we all look back on this in the fullness of time, and perhaps with a better explanation of exactly the decision-making process the president went through, it will be seen as inevitable once that debate happened, that he would have to step aside and that someone else would have to come forward. We now know who we think that person is because the signs are all aligned for her to become his successor, at least as candidate for president. So I think that's where we are, Brett. The debate happened and everything else flowed from it except for one thing, and that was the attempted murder of Donald Trump.
Harold, quickly, will they campaign together? Just about 20 seconds here. And how much will we see the president after this?
Well, I think the lead-in from Brett with the idea, or should say the reality, he had to scramble jets to fend off a Russian effort there. You're going to see a lot of the president. But I think right now the real issue for me, Mark, is that he and Kamala Harris will now be co-presidents really over the next 6 months.
Okay. Panel, thank you very much. A historic night. Meantime, we want to mention Fox News is inviting former President Trump and Vice President Harris to participate in a debate. That event would take place September 17th in Pennsylvania.
We have offered to discuss specifics with the two campaigns. We're open to negotiation over an exact date, format, location, as well as whether there would be an audience or not. All of those things still to be figured out.
We have a long way ahead to November. We'll cover you all the way. Next stop is the Democratic Convention in Chicago in a few weeks. But history in the making tonight. Thanks for watching our special coverage of President Biden's address to the nation. Jesse Waters Primetime is next. Good night from the White House.
Joe Biden speaking to
where they were both part of the interwar Black Parisian circles that fostered kind of negritude and other really interesting currents of Black internationalism.
But a lot of people did hear, including friends who were watching TV with the Brady's 2-year-old son, Scott.
As an existential threat that he was the one, he kept insisting he was the one who had to do it. I mean,
Kidney cough is a dietary supplement developed by doctors and pharmacists. It's been proven in laboratory tests to reduce the rate of calcium oxalate crystal growth by 99%. That's right, 99%. Just take kidney.
A miracle.
Against all odds, Jim Brady survives, though he'll be permanently disabled and wheelchair-bound for the rest of his life. The other victims also undergo surgery and survive. Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy was hit in the chest, and D.C. policeman Tom Delahanty was shot in the back. That evening, FBI agents searched John Hinckley's Washington, D.C. hotel room.
Hinckley had laid out, and this was the bizarre thing, really bizarre, he had laid out there from the morning's newspaper and the president's schedule, he had beside that a statement, really in the form of a letter to the actress Jodie Foster.
In his letter,
it becomes a central sort of project in the 20th century. It was an ongoing project.
Give me the chance with this historical deep.
I believe a way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. It's the best way to unite our nation.
So he's not, he's saying that his record, his accomplishments, his leadership merited a second term, but that wasn't, he doesn't acknowledge the reason behind the questions, but he says the existential threat that the country's facing, in his view, merited him to step aside.
Except the Unite My Party part.
The Unite My Party. And this whole idea, he said there's a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, younger voices, and that time is now, right? That was a forceful endorsement of Kamala Harris. It's also interesting, if you think about Kamala Harris's candidacy, one of the biggest things she's facing is doubts, right? That a black woman can win the highest office in the land. In his closing remarks, this idea that a kid from Scranton with a stutter could make it all the way to the White House, it's also encouraging Americans to widen their imagination about who can ascend to the highest office.
And,
right?
the way that he described her.
Right. Yeah.
Tough.
Exactly.
Smart.
Experienced, an incredible partner. And he said history is in your hands. Nothing is beyond your capacity, including electing an African-American woman to the presidency.
So you have probably, for the research for your book, listened to more Joe Biden speeches than anyone other than perhaps Joe Biden.
I like to be alone.
So, what did you make of it? What did you think?
You know what was fascinating about it, Jake, was LBJ, when he dropped out, was very ambivalent about it. And let's be honest, Joe Biden is not completely at peace with this decision, but he is clear about it, and he was candid about it. That's what was striking to me. It is going to be years while he works through this decision, thinking could it have gone another way, but he was completely clear about the stakes, about why he did it. At one point he said, I gave my heart and soul to this. What he didn't say was he also gave his body. This is and showing us that he is in the winter of his career too. And in that way, I think he gets to end it on the terms on which he started it, which is by saying, there is no graver threat that we have faced in the whole time I've been in politics, and it is now in your hands. It was, in a sense, a moment of delivering it to his successor, and then delivering it to all of us.
What does your reporting tell you about what actually convinced him? Because obviously behind the scenes, first of all, the voters have been saying, according to polls and focus groups for quite some time, that they had concerns about his age. And then we know that Speaker Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, George Clooney, like lots of people who have been integral to his campaign were saying, you have to stop. What ultimately was the straw that broke the camel's back here?
It was the realization from people who he trusted, most importantly inside his circle, Mike Donilon, Steve Ricchetti, but also Nancy Pelosi to a degree, that his political path had closed. The political path, not the biological, personal, chronological path. He's probably still very unsure about that. But he is at his core a political creature. And when he was told, you're going to lose Virginia, New Mexico, places that the president, you cannot lose those and win the presidency, and you're going to hurt this place you love so much, Congress, for him, that became a completely inescapable problem.
Yeah, and that's you had me thinking about the point that you made right before we were coming on the air. This idea that whether or not his legacy is going to stand up in the way that he wanted to frame it tonight is going to depend on what happens in November. Because if, in fact, Kamala Harris, the presumptive nominee, loses to Donald Trump in November, there are going to be so many questions for the Democratic Party to soul search about how they got to a point where they denied themselves a primary process, a crucible that could have produced perhaps a stronger candidate. The number of what-ifs would just explode.
Whereas I think, if what he clearly wants to set up here actually happens, there will be a lot of people who will view it in the selfless, sort of heroic lens that he wants it to be viewed.
How much do you think we're going to see Joe Biden in the 6 months going forward, unless there is an actual ceasefire to announce in Gaza or some sort of major legislation? Like, I don't think that dealing with, for instance, reporters has been the favorite part of his job.
It used to be.
Very well when he was on the Senate.
When I covered him in the Senate, he loved us
sure.
very much.
But as a general note, I mean, first of all, I think there'll be a natural inclination for him to let Vice President Harris take center stage. But beyond that, like, how much do you think we're going to see him?
I think that depends on how much he can get done. We're going to see him tomorrow in a very difficult conversation with the Israeli Prime Minister. You heard the president talking about NATO and trying to fight up for Ukraine. Ukraine is on the ballot. America's role in the world is on the ballot, even though Joe Biden is not. So when he sees the opportunities, to Evan's point, he's a very proud man, an incredibly stubborn man. We know he is mad about this and angry about this, even if he has come to peace with the political math part of it. We know it stirs at him. So what can he do to build his legacy? And again, if he's standing up for America in the world, domestically, there's nothing that can be done. The Congress isn't going to do anything. Are there things he can do through executive action? He will look for those opportunities. But you're absolutely right. One of the reasons voters were way ahead of Washington in saying, is he up to the job, is because he has been such a less visible president. Way less visible than Donald Trump, but even less visible than even if you go before Trump, who's ever president. How will they choose? I think this is an interesting question for him and his staff. How do they choose those moments? When is it helpful to be out there? How much power do they give Harris over that? The president wants to do this. Are you okay with that? None of us have, 68. I was a baby. Some of you weren't even born yet. All of us. So we've never one of us. I was 5. But none of us have lived through this. Where you have a sitting president who's not running, his vice president who is, and how do you work that?
And he's still a beloved figure, right, among some of these folks.
What does he say at the convention?
Yeah, what does he say?
He's going to have a Democratic convention with an incumbent president who's not running.
And he will. Now, all the people that were pushing publicly or privately are on social media, embracing him, extolling him, talking about how wonderful. I'll come back to it. We got 15 hours of this. Anderson, back to you.
Jake, I was born in 1967. I can't believe I'm older than you.
What are you talking about? Look at your hair, Papa.
Let's go back to the White House and CNN's MJ Lee. I understand you have some new reporting about the response the president received from his team at the White House.
Yeah, Anderson, I don't know if you might be able to hear behind me, but from here at the South Lawn where we are, we've been able to hear some loud applause coming from the Rose Garden. That is where we are told all White House staff have gone out to greet the president. The First Lady is there as well, and we could make out that the president was speaking to his staff on microphone. I am told that they are going to celebrate by having ice cream, of course, the president being famous for his love of ice cream. But clearly this is meant to be a real show of support by everyone in the White House for the president after the president just delivered what had to have been a really challenging speech after a very difficult period for him, politically speaking. And I know we were talking about this before the speech a little bit, but this really has been an incredibly emotional time for everyone in the building behind me. I was talking to some folks and getting their reactions after the president's speech wrapped up, and one of them said that they were watching with their colleagues, and a lot of them had tears in their eyes. They said that they felt like the speech was beautiful, that he really has given his heart and soul, and that he really is a good man, is what one White House official said. Another senior White House official I spoke to said that they felt like it was a bittersweet speech to watch as he summed up the president, his achievements over the last 3.5 years, and saying that even still, all of that is really bigger than one person. And they said that the last 3 weeks for them, this official, has been incredibly painful, and they told me, I'm just so glad that after all of that, he had the chance to argue for his legacy on his own terms.
What do you expect the president's schedule to look like, in the days and weeks ahead? I mean, is the White House going to add more public events to underscore that he's still in the job? Is he going to be out campaigning for Harris?
Yeah, I mean, certainly everything had been put on hold for so long now, ever since the president tested positive for COVID last Wednesday, and then as we were waiting for the president to go public with that decision over the weekend, we we certainly do think that there's going to be a bit of a recalibration. We already know that there were some scheduling changes that were made to the end of this week when he was expected to do some political events and travel. That had been wiped clean from his political calendar. But I think the two spaces to watch really are what role does he have to play as he is now hoping that Vice President Kamala Harris will become the Democratic nominee and eventually defeat Donald Trump. He is now the most senior Democratic surrogate for the vice president. So will he really get out there and travel? And what kind of message will he have? How will he see himself as being the most useful as he campaigns for the vice president? And then, of course, the second bucket is the legacy. Is there going to be some kind of legacy tour where he really works on finishing the job that he has started, which is a phrase that he has used a lot. So we do expect the travel to pick up. We do expect to see him more. But for right now, it sounds like he is having some ice cream in the Rose Garden. Anderson.
MJ Lee, thanks very much. The source's Caitlin Collins also joins us tonight. Caitlin?
Yeah, Anderson, thanks. I'm sitting here with Jeff Zeleny and Jamie Gangels. We were listening to the president deliver that speech inside the Oval Office. And Jeff, obviously, you and I both have covered the White House. The Oval Office is actually that large. And I noticed that from the reporters in the room, there were 40 people in the room, including President Biden. It was his children, Hunter and Ashley, his grandchildren, the First Lady. And they said also Mike Donilon and Steve Ricchetti. Obviously, those, if you've covered President Biden, those are two of his closest aides. The two people he summoned to his beach house on Saturday as he was making this final decision that culminated with that address tonight.
So poignant, and of course they were responsible for getting him over the line to seeing what so many people in his party saw, that he simply was going to be a weight on the ticket. But watching him in the Oval Office there, I was reminded of a speech he gave in the Rose Garden in 2015 when he stepped away from running for president that year. And President Obama was at his side. Dr. Biden was there as well, and he said this was not his time. At that point, he thought he was leaving public life. He was given the Medal of Honor by President Obama, and he thought he was done with public life. But he had an amazing sort of return to the White House. So I'm sure it's difficult for him to think of that in this moment now. But the fact that he served a year and came back, or served a term and came back, is really pretty extraordinary. But I was struck also at the end. This was largely about the country and him, but he also said, I've made my choice. This was not a campaign a message or ad for Vice President Harris, but he endorsed her full square. So you know that that is where his mind is. That is also part of his legacy if she is elected in November. And if she's not, he owns that as well.
Can I just quickly add, I talked to a source who helped with the speech and was talking about the underlying theme that Joe Biden wanted to get across. And the source said to me that he wanted it to be heartfelt. It certainly was that. But that the most important thing was that country and democracy matter more than ambition. And look, President Biden isn't the only ambitious politician. That goes with the territory. But I think that it can't,
wow, ¿qué tal aquí la gasolina? $5.49.
That he did not see this as an ordinary
$5.49 la gasolina aquí.
As a fight against Donald Trump. And that's why the word democracy and country.
Well, and obviously he has the trappings of the Oval Office to make that push for Vice President Harris, as we saw him do wholeheartedly there at the end, talking about how he believes she's capable, she's experienced, saying, you know, essentially to the American voters, this is in your hands to make this decision. I've made mine, as you referenced, Jeff. And, you know, this comes as we didn't see her. We didn't expect to see her. She's not even in Washington right now. She's out on the campaign trail. But it comes as she's making decisions on who's going to be serving with her if she is in his position.
This is moving so extraordinarily quickly, but we are told that Vice President Harris will have named her running mate in 2 weeks or less. She's campaigning tonight in Houston. My guess is she was watching this speech tonight, but she's narrowing her list. I mean, Democratic lawyers are now looking through the possible running mates. So extraordinary that fewer than 4 years ago next month, she got the call from Joe Biden to be his running mate. Now she is going to make that call as well. We know that she's looking at governors, one senator, perhaps a cabinet secretary as well. So she is going through all of this. But speaking of trappings of office, she now has the trappings of office when she's out campaigning. I think the imagery that we are going to see, this is not her campaign of 2020 by every measure, but it's also nothing that we've seen before. As fact that her history-making candidacy, being a woman, being a woman of color, seeing those young children, this is something the country has not witnessed. But the incredible turn of events, I'm told she will name her vice president in less than 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, and Biden using the Oval Office to push her. I mean, he's only given 4 Oval Office addresses in his entire presidency. His 4th one, I'm sure he didn't expect to be saying and urging the American people to vote for his vice president. You're already seeing the Trump campaign complain about the fact that he was using the Oval Office to do so. I mean, that is just the benefit that he has while being president. Trump held the Republican convention on the South Lawn. But, Jamie, this comes as we're watching this, where Trump is trying to really try out these new lines of attack on Vice President Harris. We saw it tonight in his first rally since she had this ascent towards being the presumptive Democratic nominee.
So, and also, I just want to say, he mispronounces her name every single time. That is not by accident that he does it. He's trying to make her, it's disrespectful, the other, for the world. Kamala rhymes with Mamala. It's not that hard to figure out. But just to go back to this fighting that started, this has really left the Trump campaign having to completely change their strategy. And her attack where she says prosecutor versus felon, she's come out very hard. Or I know Donald Trump's type. We know that former President Trump is very good at branding, attacking, and messaging. I think what we're seeing is that Vice President Harris is pretty good at it, too.
Yeah. Anderson, obviously, quite a moment here, as it is his 4th Oval Office address, but one where he is giving a completely unexpected address that he didn't expect to be delivering 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's for sure. Caitlin, thanks. Join me, the panel here, senior commentators, Liz Griffin, Scott Jennings, and former Harris Communications Director Ashley Etienne. Alyssa, I mean, first of all, how do you think President Biden did, and what do you think President Trump is going to, where's he going to attack him on this one?
Powerful and historic remarks, and I thought that the imagery of presidents are really custodians of the Oval Office, of the Resolute desk. Their people voted in, but it will be passed to other people, reminding people, as Vance said, the juxtaposition to Donald Trump losing and refusing to leave. And this is somebody who's not yet lost and is willfully passing the torch to somebody. I think that will stick with people. Donald Trump was watching on Air Force One. Trump Force One. He put out an image of him watching. I think that the argument now is basically Kamala Harris and Democrats took him out. The Democratic elites stepped in to put someone more competitive in. But that's not really a helpful message. I don't know that resonates with Republicans. I think they need to start taking the case directly to Kamala Harris. And I imagine they'll stop talking about Joe Biden going forward.
It's odd to me that just a few weeks ago, heck, a few days ago, most Democrats were still looking into television cameras and saying that this person is up to another 4 years. I mean, he's obviously running on fumes. They weren't cheap fakes, no matter what the government told you. In fact, I still think it's a legitimate scandal how they ever arrived at the decision to run again in the first place. I still think his family and his top staff have a lot of explaining to do. Most of this seemed like a stump speech to me. It seemed like he gave the speech that he always wanted the campaign to be about, which was he wants credit for this record that he thinks is historic and was not getting out of the campaign. I'm still shocked, by the way, at how easy it is to overthrow the president. I mean, I think we all think of this office as being impenetrable. He got 81 million votes in 2020, and then he got 14 million more. But at the end of the day, he was no match for a handful of party bosses who run the Democratic Party. So, look, I'm happy to give him all the grace that he deserves because he's on his way out. But at the end of the day,
it really sounds like that.
A bunch of people looked into TV cameras over the last days, weeks, and months and told you a lot of things that were not true about this president. I hope he is okay for the next few months, but it was obvious it was time, not tonight, but a while ago.
Ashley, what did you think of the talk tonight?
I think President Biden is beloved by so many here in this country and around the world. Those of us who've been able to work with him and who know him love him as a leader and who he is as a leader. what he represents. He will go down in history as one of the most effective presidents in American history. Not just his record, but his love for this nation makes him, in my opinion, an object lesson and an inspiration for the next generation of leaders. The line that I loved most was this one, and that was, and it makes me emotional just saying it, that the cause of the nation is larger than any one of us. And you contrast that with what we saw from Donald Trump today and from the Republican Party that's become a complete cult of personality, willing to give it all up, sacrifice it all for someone who says he wants to be a dictator on day one, that he wants to terminate the Constitution, that he puts retribution ahead of the interests of the American people. So to me, this is a really sad day, and it makes me very emotional. But what's very clear, and the president closed out on this note, that the fight for the soul of our nation continues. But there are many of us who are saying today, well done, that good and faithful servant.
David, I want to play something else that the president said tonight.
I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. I draw strength and I find joy in working for the American people. But this sacred task of perfecting our union, it's not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. And we can never forget that. And I never have.
It's so interesting, David, listening to that, and just the whole tone of the president's night. You know, there was so much talk at the convention before Donald Trump actually spoke that the assassination attempt had changed him somehow. People were putting that word out. I think Scott was anticipating that as well.
72 hours of grace.
Yes, and clearly that is not the case. In fact, he at a rally, I think it was today or yesterday, he said, I'm supposed to be nice. They say something happened to me when I got shot. I became nice. And then he went on to say, I'm not going to be nice.
And then displayed how he was nice.
Yeah. But here tonight, this man has had his entire career upended, the job he's looked for, this very difficult decision that he's made, and whatever he may feel personally about it, and whatever anger he has expressed behind the scenes, which people have reported on, he had a lot of grace tonight.
Yeah, he did have a lot of grace. And I just want to say, Scott, you're my friend, man, and I love you, and I know you're a good person. You got to take a step back here and show the grace that you said you wanted to show. The president wasn't toppled by party bosses. He was toppled by the reality of his situation. It was the American people who made a judgment. It was helped along by your party for 5 years, but they made a judgment, and he recognized the judgment they made, and he decided that the stakes in this fight are such that he could better advance the cause that he believed in by stepping aside. That was a big thing to do and a hard thing to do. And I'm going to give you some political advice, though you're very, very good at this. I would step back.
All right. He llegado. Saludos, buenas tardes. Hoy, una vez más, hoy 24 de julio del 2024, siendo las 5:46 de la mañana, hora local de aquí de Pasadena, California. Sí, hora local de aquí de Pasadena, California. 5:46 de la tarde, hora local. Vendemos aquí a Tarantino's Pizza, a una reunión familiar con los primos. Saludos para todos ustedes. Espero se encuentren bien, deseando lo mejor, y nos vemos al rato de regreso a Los Ángeles y a Inglewood, California, Estados Unidos, norte de América, continente americano. Saludos y hacer las cosas bien para que nos siga yendo bien. ¡Ánimo!